October 31st, 2008. We're meeting today with Mr. Ralph Boehner at his home in Greeley, Colorado. My name is Brad Hoops. I'm the interviewer for the Northern Colorado Veterans History Project. Welcome, Ralph, and I appreciate you sitting down to tell your story today.
Thank you.
Let's start out, if we could. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your date of birth, where you were born, a little bit about your family.
I was born on 21st of March 1917 in a farmhouse southwest of Glen Elder, Kansas. I lived there until my parents lived there until after the World War II, and then my brother went and moved there. I have the brothers, oldest in the family, and then my sister is a year older than I am, and then I have two twin brothers who are 3 years younger than I am. We lived on a cattle and sheep and wheat farm primarily, and we did the farm. What in those days they said was my dad was a big farmer, but he also did it with the help of his sons. I remember in 1924, when I was 7 years old, the folks told us that if we got to be a wheat ground all ready for planting, we would go to Colorado for a vacation. Now, my dad and his cousin owned a combine together, and of course, they worked together during harvest and repairing combines, and he'd tell us a lot about that. And we thought that there would be about the ultimate in going on a vacation. So when I was 7 years old and my brother was 10, we did most of the plowing, not all of it.
Wow.
Dad helped some.
At 7?
At 7. I rode a sulky plow, which is a one bottom moldboard plow with 3 horses on it to pull it. My brother rode on a 2-bottom plow and had 5 horses pulling it. And Dad had harnessed the horses for us, but we put the bridles on and hitched them up and went to the field and all that sort of thing. And we took the vacation. And to this day, I remember more about went on that vacation at 7 years old than any other vacation I ever took.
Is that right?
And so don't be reluctant to think that young kids don't get a lot out of vacation. I suppose we probably, like anybody else, got a few twisted notions, but then older people do that too.
Yeah, yeah. Now, were you? Did you grow up in a part of Kansas that was affected by the Dust Bowl?
Well, I think all Kansas was affected. We weren't quite as much. I grew up in north central Kansas, which is about 40 miles south of the Nebraska border, but about halfway east and west. It's about 400 miles across Kansas, east to west, and we were about 200 miles from the western border and eastern border. And western Kansas had it a little worse, and as you went east, it diminished quite a little bit, but we had 2 storms that were especially bad. One of them was in the spring of 1935, when I was a senior in high school. Our class had a picnic party, and we went to the local theater after the picnic. And during that, while the dust storm came up, and you could see the light so plain because the dust was so full in the air. And I got up and went out and looked outside, didn't go out. I just went to the door and looked out. I couldn't see the building across the street. That's how bad it was. And so the next morning, I didn't go home that night. Most of the cars wouldn't start. They got electricity in the, and unless you took out your distributor and cleaned it all out and didn't do that. I know I had a good friend that lived 2 blocks from the theater. I made it down the main street, well, first block, where they had lamps about every 20, 30 feet. I'm not sure how far they are. And enough light that he could see good. But he went north and got off the main street. They had lights at each intersection. But he said he waited and got home, but he walked with 1 foot on the sidewalk and 1 on the grass. So he had to. And the other one was in the next year, in the spring of '36. I was a senior in high school then, and my sister was teaching a little country school, and we started to go to the schoolhouse, and here come the old clouds rolling up. That's what they rolled, and we turned around. When we got home, it just hit where we were, and the chickens all went to roost. When cows turned dark, and we went to the house and hung up we had a clothesline in there that stretched between across the room in front of the windows, and we hung sheets on them and wet them, trying to get as much of the stuff out as you could, but you couldn't keep near all of it out. So those were the 2 worst, but we had day after day that certain fields would blow, and farmers were paid to list them, which is put a deep, try to keep the wind from blowing the land away, and also start somebody else's, because you start to get that dust, and it'll just increase the size that it covers. I went to high school at Cocker City, Kansas. Our address was Glen Elder. We lived right in the dividing line. Our neighbors next door to her were either one or the other telephone. And I graduated in '35, and we did farm milk cows in the morning, evening. I think it depended on the year, but usually about 3 or 4 cows each morning and evening.
Did you continue working on the farm after you graduated from high school?
Yes and no. At the end of the first semester, and the year after I followed, I went to junior college in Beloit, Kansas for a semester. Then I, 36 and 7, I guess in the fall of '37, I enrolled at Kansas State University in Manhattan, Kansas, and it was Kansas State College then, and graduated in 1940. Then I taught 2 years of vocational ag in high school in western Kansas, and it was there that I, one Sunday after going to church and eating lunch at the local cafe where I ate all the time, I came home and sitting on the divan and turned on the radio and heard that Pearl Harbor had been bombed. Didn't know where Pearl Harbor was, and I don't think I was a rare one. I'd say that 1 in 100 knew where Pearl Harbor was. I doubt that.
Yeah, right.
Probably 1 in 300 is near close.
Right,
be
yeah.
my guess, maybe 400. And so I finished that second term I taught there that year, and they had passed the law of a Congress whereby all teachers were deferred as long as that term was. So it didn't interrupt the schools. Besides that, they probably had more volunteers and draftees than they could.
And you were actually fairly old for that time period, too. Weren't most of the draftees 17, 18, 19 years old? And you were, what, 24?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was an old man. I'll get to that later.
Yeah.
Yes, most of them were graduating high school was pretty near a admission that you were fresh right bait for the draft. Well, anyhow, I went to Dodge City, which is nearby where I was teaching, and did some inquiring around and found out different branches of service had, for college graduates, they had certain inducements to get in. And so I made an appointment to go to Oklahoma City. You couldn't do anything locally. So I made an appointment for May 9th, 1942 to go to Oklahoma City. The only 2 days I missed teaching were those 2 days, Thursday and Friday, when I went to Oklahoma City. And the superintendent gave me permission. I went to him and got permission. I don't know if he just said no, I don't know what I'd done. The Lord had an appointment with the Marine Corps. So I signed up that day, and they said, go home and we'll send you a notice when we want you to come, and orders, and so forth to proceed. So that's what I did.
Now, you chose the Marines because they had the best officers program, or how did you come to choose that branch of the service?
I liked it the best. I
Did you?
mean, I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
Who knows why you do it?
Yeah.
You know you have to make a decision, but I had been up for the draft. Maybe sooner went in this way. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
But I said if I want to go in, I wanted to go in with good people, and I still like to associate with good people. I detest people that have no accountability nor responsibility. And to this day, that's the trouble with this nation, is that we don't have people that are accountable for their actions. They always want somebody else to do it for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that there is exactly what we are getting into right now, is going to be run by a bunch of people that are not responsible and expect somebody else to do it for them. And if you expect somebody else to do it for them, you're going to be wanting. And the older or worse it gets, as when you ask 1/4 of the people to support 75% of the people, your standard of living is going like it did in all countries all over the world. And communism took over, and many people are going to regret their vote on November the 4th, or if they voted early, whatever day they voted. I'll guarantee you that.
Yeah. Well, now, how long after you went down to Oklahoma City and signed up before you were finally called up then?
I'm not sure, but it was about the 1st of November of that year. I didn't think I was surprised how long it took them before they called me, but that's when they called me. So I went to the East. It was kind of, my brother was with the Army War Show, which not people maybe ever heard of.
Mm.
The Army War Show was a show whereby they went to big cities, and what it was a war bond drive. And they showed off all tanks and artillery and jeeps and all kind of equipment.
Okay.
And he was part of that. I don't know how he got in it. I just know he got it in. And so it was in St. Louis, and so I stopped in St. Louis a couple of 3 hours before I had to make a change of trains there.
You were on your way to boot camp?
I was on the way to Quantico, Virginia, which is where Marine officers train.
Okay.
I'll get to that later.
Okay.
And so I spent, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours there with him, and then I had to go and kind of make the train again. But the Army War Show is something that very few people know about.
Yeah.
But I think they spent, I don't know, close to a year. He was with that for a long time. Till he went to Belvoir, Fort Belvoir in Virginia, which isn't too far from Quantico. And he was the instructor, and one of the instructors in motor vehicle. I don't know exactly
Yeah,
what.
okay, that's fine.
So when I arrived at Quantico, we were met at the train station with some sergeants, or I'm not sure if they were sergeants. I don't know what rank they were. Enlisted men. They were more or less to get us to the barracks, the right place. Of course, they knew where it was, how to get there. And I imagine we were a pretty clumsy bunch. And they said fall in and attention, whatever they said, I don't know. But that was the start of officers' candidates class. I'm a little confused. One of them was the 21st officers' candidate class, and after I graduated from that, after 10 weeks, they had officers, reserved officers class, ROC.
How was your transition going from civilian life to military life? Was that much of a transition for you?
Oh, sure, it's a big transition.
Yeah.
I think most everybody tell you, your time is your own. You get a little time to. They keep you busy. Some of it doesn't make sense, but then that's beside the point.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, you're supposed to. You're issued mostly work clothes and shoes and hats and whatever time of year it is. And this was November, so we got winter clothing. And it was pretty cool in Virginia. It's not as cold as it is in Kansas, but it's a lot wetter and more higher humidity.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And they don't run the weather. Good Lord does that. And sometimes it isn't too pleasant what you have to do, but you do it and go on. And according to the book that I have, Reserve Officers Class book I have here, it says that the about 80% of those that enroll in Officers Candidates class graduate, become second lieutenants.
How did you find it? Was it pretty easy for you to get through, or did
No, not. I sprained my knee, and it swelled up on me quite a bit. And the fact is, I missed a couple of days going out on the problems. Went to the sick bay instead. And I know when I was on the rifle range, range officer, he wanted me to get down on my knee a little more, and I said, well, I can't. I showed him my knee. I told him my knee was swollen up twice the size of the other one. And he looked at it. He jumped on my back and pushed me. He couldn't get me down anymore. And so I guess he satisfied after he jumped on my shoulders. But anyhow, when I was on the rifle range, I became a sharpshooter with a pistol and a sharpshooter with an M1 rifle. The highest proficiency is expert rifleman and expert pistolman, but I didn't attain that. And then they give you the marksman is, might say third place, if you get that. But I got sharpshooter in both of them, so I've had those all my life. And we graduated in January, from reserve officers, or from officers candidates class to reserve officers class. It wasn't a whole lot different, except it was a little more respectful to you then. When you're PFC, they don't give you an awful lot of respect. Sergeants don't. You'd think they'd been in the Marine Corps for a century, the way they act. Try to impress you, and they probably are 6 months or a year and a half or whatever it is all they've had. But you don't know that, and you don't ever find out. We took a lot more classes in the classroom, but we still went out on camps and mock thing. All Marines are taught as if they're going to be infantry, regardless of what you become later. You're a part of the infantry, first of all. You learn to carry your rifle. We became pretty efficient on close order drill. I'd hate to do it now. My reaction wouldn't be fast enough, but we could do a lot of fancy stuff. And I'm sure that most of them have been through that would agree that it was pretty interesting, and also and let me see, in March, I know that I looked it up the other day, 24th is when we graduated from the Reserve Officers class. And when we graduated, we got assigned all kind of jobs, and they posted them on the board. And I went out there and saw what mine was, and I forget exactly, but I remember I found out that another fellow by the name of Joe Tabor was assigned to the same place I was. So I went down in the area where Company B was, and I got down to where I thought the T's would be pretty close, and I asked, does anybody know Joe Tabor? And somebody said, right over there. And so I went over and I talked to Joe Tabor, and I said, Joe, I said, you want to come down here for is you and I got the same assignment to go to Hartford, Connecticut, to Pratt & Whitney aircraft plant school up there, and would you like to go together? And he said, sure I would. Well, it was one of my friendships that I made there in a long time. Yeah. And, I don't know, Joe passed away maybe 15 years ago. I'm not sure exactly how long ago, but we went down to see him here a few years before he died, and he was from Burleson, Texas, which is a suburb of Fort Worth. And so he was, we were together for those 8 weeks at Hartford.
What exactly were you go up there to train for?
They were Pratt & Whitney airplane engines.
So the maintenance part of it?
Yes.
Okay.
They tore them down and started, and we assembled them back up.
Any idea why they chose you for that school?
Well, no, I don't have the slightest idea. I can give you a couple of theories that I've got, but I'm not sure they're right.
Yeah.
In the class that I graduated from, and every 2 weeks they graduate a class from Quantico or reserve officers classes, and they take in new ones at that time. And World War II they did this. Today I'm sure it isn't true. But there was about 190 graduate, approximately that each every 2 weeks. I was told that 100 and, I'm not sure, 15 or something like that asked for aviation. There was about a dozen of us that got aviation, and I didn't ask for it. I asked for tanks. Only reason I can figure out, and I haven't the slightest idea, maybe this is my theory, but when I was in college, I taught vocational ag, and you have to have shop courses for that. Now that's my theory. I don't know if it'll hold up or not. I don't think I'll ever find out, and it didn't worry me much with it.
Yeah.
But anyhow, a few of us that got chosen for it, some of them got to be different other things. Mess officer, one of them, I know our classmates got mess officer because he was mess officer at one place I was. And I don't know what all of them were. My good friend, only one person in the Marine Corps that I knew then and still do, got into tanks. And that's a story I'm going to go into a little bit. He was from northern Billings, Oklahoma. He grew up on a farm there, and wheat and cattle and sheep farm, and that's what I grew up on. And I talked to him here just last week. He is about 4 years younger than I am. But he and I were the only two farm boys in our squad, and that, I guess, attracted each other to each other. The rest of them were lawyers, and some of them had just been in the Marine Corps and went to officers and reserve officers class, so forth. But he is a pretty prominent man now. I don't know if you've ever heard of Henry Bellman. He, I think in 1962 he was elected governor of Oklahoma.
Oh, is that right?
And he served two-year terms as governor of Oklahoma. He was the first Republican governor in the state of the history of Oklahoma. And he became a U.S. Senator, and he served 2 terms. And he came back and served another, but this time was a 4-year term as governor of Oklahoma. And if you'll notice that the governor, 2 U.S. senators, and for a long time, all their representatives were Republicans, which speaks pretty well of Henry Bellman.
Right, sure.
In my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a kind of a logical guy, I think. I don't go much for this old bullaboo and hip hip hooray and so forth. I want to see what you've done and what you can do, and don't believe what this man says. And under certain circumstances, I believe him, and under other circumstances, I don't put much stock in what he says.
And he was a man of his word. He was
I
pretty
don't
straightforward.
know what made him that popular. I can't answer you that. I don't know. I remember I got it, and I still got the letter invited me to, because when I found out that, well, I hadn't been in contact with him, I hadn't gotten served. I found out he run for governor of Oklahoma, Bellman, and he spelled it exactly like Bellmon. And a lot of them think it's M-A-N, it's M-O-N. And when I did that, I had relatives in Oklahoma, and I wrote and told them that there's a real good man, you want to vote for him. And I don't know how big a majority he won by, but I know that he was the first Republican governor. And he's still fairly good, but he told me that he has, his eyes are such that his depth is no good, and he had to quit driving the car.
Oh, okay.
And so, but I thought it was kind of interesting tidbit.
Yeah, oh, certainly. Yeah.
And I know the thing that he had a couple, 3 things in common, besides being, and I don't know what people do, but he neither smoked nor drank, and I didn't either. And that always kind of attracted to him. Let me see, where am I?
Where you were at aviation school. Where'd you go from there then?
Well, then I went 8 weeks at Hartford, Connecticut.
Yeah.
There we had people from the Air Force and the Navy and the Marines. All 3 of them. Most of them were from the Air Force. And we had an interesting little note, I thought, was that had a softball team, and the Marines, I think there was only about a dozen of us. And we had a real good pitcher in Detroit. He went to, it's what's the county seat of where Detroit is?
Oakland?
Wayne.
Oh, okay.
Wayne County. Wayne, that's where he went to school. But I caught for him, and he's the fastest man. But we won most all our games.
Is that
I think
right?
we won every game. And I was, I never played an awful lot of softball or baseball, but played quite a little too. Just
Yeah.
pickup games mostly.
Yeah, right.
Nothing organized. But it's kind of interesting that here we were, and we didn't have to get many runs, but we had to get some. And I kind of interested, thought that was kind of a unique thing
Yeah, yeah.
in that we did. Then I went to Patterson, New Jersey to Wright Engines School for 2 weeks, which is, Patterson's is on across from New York City River. It's in New Jersey. And then we
Let me interrupt you if I could, Ralph. What was it like? Here's this farm boy from Kansas in the big cities of the East Coast, in New York City and such. What was that experience like for you?
Oh, I was curious.
Yeah.
I don't know why, especially, I didn't know my way around.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they do things a little different.
Yeah.
And when you're in Rome, you do as Romans do, to some extent at least. And it didn't bother me much. When I was at Quantico, I went up to New York City several times, and also I had my high school chum was in Washington working for the government, and I'm not even sure what he did. I don't know if I ever asked him or forgot. I'm not sure which it is. But anyhow, he lived there in Washington, and got married. He was a year older than I am. He graduated a year before I did in high school. And he one weekend he maneuvered things around that he got a bunch of us together. He got my college roommate, who was in the Coast Artillery. He was a graduate at K-State. I'm not even sure if he graduated K-State at that time. But anyhow, he had taken reserve officers training, and he was brilliant. He belonged to all the scholastic stuff. And still, when we were kids, he was a pitcher of note in our community. He had a curveball that was pretty hard to hit, and I used to catch for him. And it was, that weekend, he'd got together a guy named Herb Schaefer, who had been my 6th grade teacher in a little country school. And Herb lived in that district, but about 2 miles from where I grew up. And my brother, who was at Fort Belvoir, and an instructor at the Officers Candidate School there. I think there was 5 of us. Let's see if I got it right now. My college roommate, my brother, my friend in high school, and my teacher, 6th grade teacher, and I. That's 5 of us.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's right. So it was kind of interesting, and that was I'm not sure when that was, but probably January, or probably in February or March, because I was commissioned then.
Okay.
And that's all I can't remember exactly what it was.
That's fine.
But that was, it was kind of an interesting side night. He was my favorite teacher, the only man teacher I ever had in grade school. And Then I came, had orders to report in California, but to Miramar, which is just outside of San Diego. It was at that time, I don't know sure what they call it, but it was mostly a place together to stop and go on overseas.
Now, did you get a chance to stop home on your way up to
Yes,
California?
they gave us enough time, and I stopped at home, and it was July or June, I'm not sure, June I guess it was, and that's when they were harvesting, and I helped to harvest the wheat, and it was kind of welcome help.
Yeah.
And I remember that repairs were hard to get, and we had a sprocket that drove the header, and it wasn't engineered quite right, and it wore out pretty bad. And you couldn't get the part all the time, so I remember that I made, we had the original, and the sprockets would wear out, and so you had to put the cogs on them, so that, and of course, it wasn't as precision made as the one at the factory, and because it probably didn't last but 2 or 3 days. Oh, I rebuilt that thing 2 or 3 times when I was home, and I was kind of glad because my brothers knew how to weld and so forth, but they were in the service too, and so it was kind of a welcome deal.
Sure.
But I went to Miramar, and I was there, I don't know, 10 days, give or take, who knows. And we'd muster in the morning and the evening, and if they had orders for you, well, then you got your orders. And if you didn't, well, had another day to sit around. We went down to La Jolla, California, to the beach, and it was only about 15, 20 miles away. They'd take us down in a big bus, and we'd go to the beach and put in time. And that was kind of interesting. And what we did was, till we got orders, and then our order said to, I don't remember all the details, but anyhow, we took a train to Oakland, California, and shipped out from there. And of course, you don't know what you're going on or anything. When we got on board ship, we were on board the famous Enterprise. And the other ship, there's 2 ships there, was the Yorktown, which is also an aircraft carrier, and they're sister ships. And they had left most of their crew except the personnel to run the ship. And they unloaded all the planes, the pilots and crew chiefs and so forth. Didn't come, and they took us, and we sailed to Pearl Harbor. And
Let me interrupt you here as well. Here, once again, here's a farm boy from Kansas. What was it like out on the sea? Did you get your sea legs? How was the cruise to Pearl Harbor? Do you remember?
When we left, we went under the Golden Gate Bridge. Well, I was on the rear end, and there was a couple, 3 of us there. I'm not sure, it was 2 or 3 of us. We were just shooting the breeze, and the waves weren't too big, but I got a little seasick then. But not, when I got off of the, walked up and got to the midship, you see, you don't get near the amount as you do there, and that was the only time I ever was kind of seasick.
Was that okay?
But, no, but that was quite a trip. Most all of them ships went out under escort, but the Enterprise and the Yorktown were about the fastest things on the sea, and they zigzagged, and so a submarine is what they do that for. They had to be just plain lucky to catch one of them sometime, and they probably did someplace, but didn't there, didn't have any trouble. But and we landed in Eva, which is for marine. I think it was just for aviation, but I'm not sure, not positive about it. But it's about 20 miles out of Honolulu, not too far from Pearl Harbor. I stayed there for 10 days or so, and then I went. About the only duties we had there was they had troops moving through, and they'd sign officers to more or less organize them a little bit so they could clean up and give them something to do, and so us. It was. Then I was went to sent to Midway, and we flew out to Midway, which is 1,100 miles approximately. That's what we always called it. And they went, and when I was on Midway, they assigned me, told me I was going to have the flight department, whatever that was. And it gave me 2 sergeants and 3 PFCs. And we were there a week or so, and then we went to Midway. And Midway, people don't realize how little Midway is because it had been a big stop on the way of the Pan American ships that went. And at Midway, there's really no soil. It's all coral reef. But Pan Am, in order to make a beautiful little spot, they hauled soil out from Hawaii out there. And I don't know, they had 2 or 3 acres on the thing, and that was their, they'd made an officers club out of it when the Marines took it over.
Now, I'm sorry to interrupt you again here.
Oh, that's
in
fine.
both cases, in Pearl Harbor and Midway, was the damage pretty much cleaned up by the time you got to both of those places, or was there still signs of?
Well, you see, at Pearl Harbor, I never did see it until,
you didn't? Okay.
Until just a few years ago.
Oh, okay.
I never was there.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I have friends that were there that told about it. When I was on Midway, I had a couple, 3 friends there. Andy Anderson, whatever his first name was, I don't know. But anyhow, he was the adjutant in the squadron, and he'd been at Pearl Harbor. And another fellow, I can't even remember his name, had been there, and they told about how damaged he was. But at Midway, you see, actually the Battle of Midway never touched Midway. It was out at sea. And so the Battle of Midway, there never was, as far as I know, I don't think that Midway was ever hit by a hostile shot.
Oh, well, for some reason I thought the Japanese pilots had bombed it, but.
Well, they may have.
Okay.
I'm not going to say.
All right.
As far as I know, that I know they did weight. They took weight.
Oh, maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Okay.
Weight, but I'm not going to say.
Yeah.
I've read the battle. Well, I'm getting ahead of that. But at Midway, they sent us. Had those 5 enlisted men, but we didn't have any ship. We didn't have anything. 5 of them, and those 2 sergeants were more or less. When we were there, then they sent an icebreaker came out, and that's icebreaker is made out of wooden, and they're about a foot thick or longer. I mean, about 3 foot thick, that they told me. I never saw the ship. But anyhow, they said that ship brought about 50 troops out. And told us that we could keep, I'm not going to remember how many they told us, but about half of them. And so we And also they had a second lieutenant on there, Captain Joe York, who was a real fine man. He graduated, I'm not sure what class it was, probably a few months after I had. And he was from Georgia. And they assigned him to, as my assistant, and told us that we could keep so many individuals. Now, all these were, except for Lieutenant York, were they'd been through boot camp. Then they went to Oklahoma City to 6 months of aircraft maintenance school. And we interviewed every man. If they had anything on their record that said they'd been in trouble, we never even looked at them. Had so many to choose from. Why you waste your time
Right,
on
yeah.
it? And so we picked a real good crew, I think. Whether we was lucky, whether they're all that good or what, I don't know. But in all the time I had the flight department, I never really had any big problems. And they were great to work with. And most of them were, like you said a while ago, they were, most of them were 18 or 19. They'd gone to high school, graduated, and went to boot camp 10 weeks, and they'd gone to 6 months to aircraft school, and then a little time to get out there. And so they'd been in the Marine Corps 3/4 of a year to a year. And now I know we ended up with, I counted them this morning, I couldn't remember, 33 in our attachment on the flight section. And so I'll gather my thoughts a little bit. When we got to Midway, we didn't have any planes there either. We just had an aircraft hangar they told us we could hang out at. And it was empty. And so we just kind of organized ourselves a little as best we could. And those two sergeants had been, I guess they probably had potential, and they figured they helped. And we, part of our thing was to keep them interested, because you can't go to school all the time. And so when I was on Midway, it was from September to January. I was officer of the day about twice a week, and that means that, maybe about every 5 days. Junior officers do that all over the world. Anybody's been there knows that. And you do the duties that not too important, but have to be done. And if you have difficulty, you have orders to call so-and-so, and the commanding officer or the adjutant or somebody, that they tell you who to do. And so, but I've sat there and I've read the Battle of Midway as recorded by the officers of the day several times, because it was, you work 24 hours a day and you got to stay awake, except for when you're on duty call, if they call you. But I read that just something for kill time.
Yeah.
And the Battle of Midway, if it happened the way that the Battle of Midway, they didn't know what was going on. And that's the way a lot of things in wartime. I think that information is so important. Another thing I did was, there was the quartermaster, and I can't remember their name anymore, and his assistant. There were a couple of first lieutenants. They organized, or started to organize, a basketball league for the guys to do something in the evening. And all they did was took a hanger and pull the planes out and pull up. They had fixed up so the baskets and backboards were mounted, and you go in and you put sandbags on the thing so it won't slide around, and then you'd play basketball on the concrete floor. That was the floors you worked on and played on. And another, when these guys started organizing, well, they said they need a little help, and so there was a guy by the name of Andy Ferguson, who was a radio announcer in Louisiana, and I don't know what side of the station or anything, but he and I also volunteered, and so a couple of nights a week you got the fun of officiating basketball team. And then the officers had a team also, and I played on it, and had a lot of fun with it. I remember.
What were living conditions like on Midway?
Oh, Midway wasn't too bad. They had, I guess you called them bunks. They were piled up and covered with coral. And it wasn't too bad. I mean, it wasn't Taj Mahal or anything, but it wasn't too bad. And we all ate in a big dining room.
Food was pretty good?
Yeah, food pretty good.
Okay.
Not too bad. I never found the food too bad most of the time, but I never was out on, like some people were, on infantry going for days at a time. It gets, sometimes there was a lot of powdered stuff and that sort of thing, but I didn't mind it too bad. I wouldn't have been my first choice, but then a lot of things that aren't first choice all the time either. So we got along in Midway in January, or might have been February. I think in January we got orders to ship out, and we flew back to Hawaii, and then got on board a Kaiser ship. And their speed isn't too much, but it went in a convoy, and so the speed wasn't, and they had destroyers and so forth and a submarine deal. So in about the 1st of February we landed, I think it was a little after the 1st of February. That was one of the biggest operations, not especially where we were all together, but Halsey went around and he dominated, and I think he sank, I'm not sure how many, several Japanese carrier from then on after Midway, and which was probably the turning point of the war, and then that, and he also went down to Truk, T-R-U-K, and it was known as, it was the impregnable one in the Pacific. And Halsey didn't believe that for some reason, and so at daylight his planes were up on there, and the Japanese felt that out in the center was where the base were, and outside they had all the warning stations and radar and all that sort of stuff. But when they went in on that, Japanese only got a dozen or so planes in the air, maybe 2 dozen. I don't know exactly how many, but not a lot comparatively. When all the Halsey's hundreds of planes, well, they didn't last very long, and some of them were airborne, but they were taken off, and they're sitting ducks in. And he destroyed most all their planes. And got the fires going, and riddled them, they strafed them, and whatever all they did, I don't know. Bombed them. And Truk wasn't the impregnable place that they thought it was going to be. And they took, 22nd Marines took Eniwetok and Enjebi. Enjebi is one I was stationed on, really. And the Japanese had had a airfield on it before. And but what we really took Eniwetok Atoll for was Eniwetok Island, which was about 20 miles on the other end of the lagoon, and to bomb Saipan, Guam, and Tinian. And now, you want to know how big Eniwetok is? Well, it isn't very big. When the B-29s land, they got wings over water on both sides.
Oh, is that right?
It's about a mile long, and it kind of looked like a thin pie shaped. And one end is, like I said, the other end was a little wider. And then they was a defense battalion, Marine Defense Battalion, based on Eniwetok Island, and we were in Jebi. And Jebi.
So you went from Midway down to Enjebi? Or were you still at Midway?
I was in Midway, and then we went from Midway to Eniwetok Atoll, and I was in Jebi, which is one of the islands of Eniwetok Atoll.
Okay.
You understand that?
Mm-hmm.
And the Japanese had a base on that. Well, the first thing we did was the Seabees elongated their runway. We went out into the sea, I don't know, 1/8 of a mile or maybe 3/8 of a mile. I don't know exactly, or 1/4 of a mile maybe. I don't know. It was just out in there. Our Corvairs, they had when I got there, the Marines had 2 squadrons, battle squadrons. They had a fighter plane squadron and an SBD squadron, and that means dive bomber. And the dive bombers were used primarily, they don't fly too fast, but they are good for submarine patrol. Well, they don't move so fast, you can see a little more. And then the fighter squadron, they attached 500-pound bombs to them. That's the reason they had to enlarge or lengthen the runway. They could make it all right if on the old runway, but if they had the bombs on, that was something else again. Take a little longer to take off. And so what we did, we were hitting Ponape, which is, I'm not sure, I've never been to Ponape. The Japanese held it, and they bombed us. The last day we unloaded ship there, after 2 weeks or something like that of unloading ships, Japanese hit us that night, and they hit some of the supplies, including the ammunition, and it was going off around there quite a bit. And then later they came back, and we bombed them about every morning. They'd take off around daylight and go down to Ponape and keep them neutralized was the purpose of it, if you could. And I know that our squadron, and our job primarily at Eniwetok was to take care of all the visiting planes. Some of them was carrying generals, and some of them admirals, and some of them were carrying supplies in. But we had pretty heavy traffic, and our squadron, our flight department, took care of helping them, guide them into where we wanted them to go, gassing them up, cleaning them up so that they were ready to go on to the next, wherever they wanted to do, whatever was going to be done. Then we also, most of all those were SBDs or old Douglas dependables, and they brought in all kinds of people. And we had, the crew chiefs would take his men and park them, gas them up, clean them up, whatever had to be done. So they was ready to go again.
Mm-hmm.
And that was primarily our job. We also had either a Drummond duck or a TBY, which both of them have pontoons on them, so that we could rescue any planes where somebody went down.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And thank God we didn't have to do that about once, I think, all the time I did.
And that was part of your responsibility as well.
We had the planes ready.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't furnish the pilot,
Right. Right.
but somebody did. The service squadron commander, or there was quite a lot of pilots around, but we wouldn't. That was our job, was primarily, and also was make the flight plan out for them. I mean, help them. That was primarily that.
What were conditions like on this island now for you?
Oh, it's well, for a while we just slept under the stars.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. Then we got cots, and then we got tents later. After the things were pretty well secure, why they had can't remember his name now, but remember he was a captain from graduated from Iowa State at Ames. Was construction. I'm not sure what he called it. It wasn't battalion. It was just construction, and they, for instance, they put up essential stuff first, and then they went around and put up tents and laid it out like a village and got so there'd be streets more or less, or so there was some order to it. And had to dig your own. Things we got on there, you dig your own foxhole, which everybody did. Using, you get a little excited when they're bombing you and strafing you. Like one old guy, he thought he had it on his helmet, but all he had was the pith part inside. I mean, a lot of funny things happen, you know.
Yeah.
But you might have done the same thing again. Anyhow, after on there a few days, why here came orders in the mail. I don't know how come they don't call you in, but they send it to the mail. And it says, "You are now parachute officer." Well, what does that mean? Well, I knew about parachutes, a fellow small book. But the thing is, you go over and you try to do the things that, whatever the enlisted men need, and more or less. I had one parachute packer in our squadron, and he packed planes for the colonel and lieutenant colonel and pilots for the service squadron and so forth. But you have to take those parachute packs. If you leave them too long, they're either made of silk or nylon. And the silk or the nylon, either one, if it lays and creased too long, it becomes weak right where it's crossed. If you fold a piece of paper, same idea.
Okay.
And so they're supposed to do it so often, and I'm not going to tell you how long it is anymore because I kind of forgot. It seemed to me like it's 6 months or 2 months. I'm not sure which it is. But they're supposed to pack them and hang them up and let them fluff out. That's the reason you have to have a tall building. Mm-hmm. And it was made out of canvas, and they didn't have any, and they packed them. The first day, they was packing them outdoors on the ground, and they had big tarps out there and that was kind of priority, and we got lumber and stuff in, and the construction built some tables, put up some tents. I got pictures here.
Yeah, we'll dig them out after the interview and videotape them. Was it hard to adjust to the climate down there, coming from Kansas climate to a tropical climate?
Oh, no, it's warm down there, and you don't... it would be a lot harder the other way around. It's Midway isn't too awful much different than Hawaii is, and I think they say in Hawaii 55 is about as low as it gets, and 85 is about as high as it gets, and that isn't too hard to adjust to.
Right, sure.
And Midway isn't too awful much different from that. It's a little warmer down in Eniwetok. Eniwetok is the furthest west of the Marshall Islands. That's the reason it was picked. Kwajalein or Roy or some of those might have been picked if they'd have been in the situation, but then that's Kwajalein 300 miles. Well, that there on a flight 2 ways is 600 miles.
Yeah.
It might mean a lot of difference. That's the reason Eniwetok is so important, even though it's a little. The 2 islands at Midway are Sand and East, and Sand is, I was on Sand, it's the biggest island. It's about a half mile square. I mean about 320 acres. Now you wouldn't, I don't know how much rural parts you got to, but you know, Eniwetok isn't too awful much difference in the area, the 2 islands of Eniwetok and Jebi. Now they've got one that we never even, Perry and some of the others stick there, but some of them are only an acre or 2, depending on how they triple in size or maybe 4 to 5 times in size when the tide's in or out. So they're just a little tiny, just acre or 2, or in some places you can walk around that all the way around there if they'd let you. They had one had natives on Eniwetok, Perry Island. It's closer to Eniwetok than it is to in Jebi, but they had natives on there, and the only people who were allowed to see them were some of the quartermaster people took them supplies over once a week. Excuse me.
On an island that small and flat to the water, were you guys ever hit with typhoons or anything like that?
No.
Oh, so no worries.
Never were. I don't know if they can't answer you there. We never hit with typhoons. If well, I guess we got wet. Maybe pretty bad. I don't know.
Yeah.
Weather was pretty good. I mean, it was rainy spell at times. You got rain, but not terribly bad.
And eventually, over time, conditions, they built up things, so you had pretty pleasant arrangements. And
they, a lot of them, just pretty informal on your lines like that. They don't. It was interesting when we got to Eniwetok, laundry was no facilities there, and the wind is. Pretty persistent in one direction, but and it's fairly constant. There's a breeze, maybe not a wind, more a breeze, and a lot of people made little airplane laundry, or not airplane, windmill laundry facilities to wash your clothes in, and then after a while, they got so they had laundry. But they would have an old jammer there would wash their clothes, and they'd put them in there, and when they go to work in the noon, while they take them out and hang them up, and afternoon and evening they would dry. But there was scads of those little windmill things that the guys concocted, all kinds of. It shows the innovation of the kids, the people. I mean, I don't know who started it. Anything about it, but I know that it was pretty much, most of them were made pretty much alike. I suppose that some of them had probably been someplace or done it or something, I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, right.
But it was kind of interesting seeing all those little windmills just turning, and you know what they doing out here? Well, they were just doing the laundry.
Yeah. Huh. How were communications as far as riding back and forth to home? Did you do that very often? And how easy was that?
I wrote home once a week to my mother, and I wrote she's my wife now. I wrote her once a week. I had the email. I don't know if you've seen that.
The Vmail? Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And that was, I didn't like email. It seemed like it was all important, personal, and somebody seeing what you.
Reading and censoring your letters, yeah.
Yeah, that was another thing that you bring up censoring. Your duties over there overseas, like on Hawaii. Even there, you had to censor the letters. And
As the officer, would you have
Yeah,
to read
yeah,
your
yeah.
men's mail?
Well,
Would
yeah,
you do the censoring?
Well, they'd bring all of it in. And there'd be 10 or 12 of us.
Oh,
And
okay.
we were each one of us just take a pile and
Gotcha.
do it. Some of them were a lot more strict than others. Who knows what they clipped out? Some of them, I know, clipped things out I wouldn't have. I wouldn't probably clipped out things they wouldn't, but some of them were a lot more strict than
Right,
others.
okay. Uh-huh. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, who knows?
yeah.
The thing is that they didn't want names of units, where you were, what the strategic part was doing. They didn't mind telling you that you was working on airplanes, but they didn't want to tell you was bombing Pohnpei.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, sure.
yeah. And then part of it's kind of like I say, this amount of judgment to some extent. And that's what scares me about this present situation. I don't think his judgment's worth a damn. That may be the wrong situation to say, but he's never proven he's had any judgment. The type of characters he lives with and acts with and goes around with tells you an awful lot more about him than he was somebody who lived in the neighborhood.
Right, yeah.
Well, I got off the track.
Yeah. So how long then were you on the island there then?
I was on the island from February till December.
Okay.
On Eniwetok, on Eniwetok, I was on that island.
Uh-huh.
I came, let me see, well, when I was on Eniwetok, I'm not sure exactly when I got notification I became a first lieutenant. I've lost that. It's like some other stuff. I don't know where that is.
Yeah.
And but I know it was during when we first got down to, I say first, not to mean the first month or two. Maybe I had it by the time I made first lieutenant and didn't change my duties or anything that way. I don't think I got a little bit more money. And then
Where did you go from in Jebi then?
in Jebi, they had Marine Air Group had a policy whereby at first it was when you was out there 2 years, you got to go to the States for 6 months. That was kind of the policy. Well, it got changed a little bit, but it got down to about a year and a half. You was out about a year and a half, and that's when I had nothing to do with it. I was just policy of the Marine. And I came back and I was sent to El Centro, California, Marine Corps Air Base, El Centro, California. And there I was assigned again to engineering officer of the squadron, headquarters squadron, which is the base squadron. And but we didn't have any airplanes there. All we had was shops. So we had a machine shop and sheet metal shop and clean spark plugs, and I can't remember all the things we did do anymore. But anyhow, that's what I was. And then and after a while, well, it was in the summer after must have been somewhere around July. I'm not sure exactly when. Hold it a little bit. That summer, the Captain Dan Glidden had been the squadron commander of headquarters squadron, and he was transferred, or for some reason he left. I kind of knew him, but not very well. But I mean, I knew who he was. Met him 2 or 3 times. And one day I come through the mail, says, "You are now CO of the headquarters squadron." Oh, gee, I'd never done any of that kind of stuff. Adjutant, and I didn't figure I ever would, and I never paid much attention to it. But there you are, you're dumped with it. I went in and seen the colonel, and I said, "Well, I don't know, this is kind of different to me." He says, "Well," he says, "there's 2 types," and he says, "I know you'll do the job because you have in the past." He says, "Those that take responsibility and those that don't." Well, gee, I'd heard that before when I was overseas. And our colonel had said the same thing. When I got, I forgot to tell you, I was PX officer, and then the next thing I was parachute officer, and then the next thing, here came another directive through that you're now PX officer. Gee, but I'm the only one that the whole head squadron, I was the only guy that had more than one department. Well, that don't make sense to me. I mean, I got 3, and I went on, the colonel kind of complained a little bit. And he told me the same thing. He said,
So you were running all 3 departments at the same time?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. They weren't moving from one. They kept adding
I
departments.
just kept adding
Oh,
departments.
okay.
Gee, and I'm the only one guy, and still to this day, I the only one that any of the departments in any place. The service squadron and headquarters squadron are usually in the same place. And I knew the headquarters squadron, I probably knew the service squadron just as well as I did the headquarters squadron because they were the same guys. In fact, I mean, this guy might be from one squad or the other. So got the PX officer, and I went down and see the colonel about it, and he told me the same thing. That was 2 different. He was a Navy, the colonel in charge of the island in Eniwetok was a Naval Academy graduate, and he was a career man. The one at El Central was a reserve. How much duty or time he had spent in there, I don't know, but he was not a career. But they both told you the same thing. I thought that was kind of unique.
Sure, yeah.
And put more stock in. That's the reason I'm so adamant against what's being done now and going to be done, I'm afraid. I hope to God, pray that it won't happen, but I pray it will. But that's the situation. You get more. Well, then I went to.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know what you.
You were back in California now.
And it El Centro was an interesting place in that it's so hot in the summertime. It gets, I can't remember exactly, but if I remember right, 5 or 6 days and one last night, coolest it got was 103 degrees.
Oh, geez.
And I know when I was a CO of the squadron, you wanted to look a little better than I did down in the shops. I mean, and I would go down there, and our dining facilities were, I don't know, half, 3/4 of a mile away. And I know I'd walk real slow because if you walk fast, you broke out in sweat, and you'd have
Okay, right, yeah.
all over. And so
Keep going here, I'll just close this.
that was one of those things that a person would consider to that heat. And why don't you just turn it off a little bit here? I gotta get my thoughts. The coming back from El Centro, it's a situation whereby I came back to El Centro in January of 45. And in 45, the war was winding down. We were definitely winning then. But the casualties were heavy. For instance, back on, when I was on Eniwetok, I'm going back now, I kind of forgot this, was that the fleet gathered at Eniwetok to make the Saipan Guam Tinian operation. I was PX officer and I had to fly down to from Njebi to Eniwetok Island to get supplies. And I've ridden in all kinds of planes, in the Grumman Duck to the torpedo bombers, which were the big weapons that sank ships at the Battle of Midway. And those torpedo bombers were not very fast. And you remember that one of those squadrons that went out and sank those ships lost every plane but one.
Wow, jeez.
Eniwetok watched those ships together, and as far as I could see, there were ships anchored out in the ocean.
That must have been a sight.
Oh, it was a sight and a half. I tried to count the aircraft carriers because they were pretty easy comparative. And it's about 20 miles down there, and planes didn't fly too fast. If I remember right, it was 100. I tried to count, but you start here, and time you go around up here, and you get around over here, you're in an entirely different place than where you started. You haven't made a circle. You understand what I'm saying? And I think that there was approximately 100 aircraft carriers, and ship. Now then, on June 6, 1944, was D-Day in Europe. Well, nobody knows exactly, but they pretty close what day they died and so forth. But we lost 20,000 men in the first month.
Wow.
Eniwetok operation went to Saipan and Guam and landed on 15th of June. That's 9 days later. We lost, according to the encyclopedia, I may have this wrong, 16,000, I think, on Tinian, Guam, and Saipan. All right, that's 30,000. Today we're hollering like the dickens because we got 3,000 in 8 years, or 7 years. I mean, the thing is that at the same time, the city of Chicago, today we're hollering about 3,500 troops in 7 years. The city of Chicago has about 5,000 in the same period of time been murdered. And you don't see anything in the paper about that.
Yeah.
Detroit has about that many. I don't know exactly if Washington, D.C. is still that high or not. Who knows?
Yeah.
In 1906, the murder rate in the United States was 206 people. Where have we gone awry?
Yeah, right.
The question is not. Here the ACLU is sitting here battling religion and Christianity when now we've pretty near increased it 100-fold in a century, and then they say their method is better than the old Christian one. Let's get real. Let's
Yeah,
just
right.
talk about real things.
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, I got off tangent.
Yeah.
Then I got in. I got out of the service.
Well, how long were you at El Centro then? Did you finish out the war at El Centro?
Yeah, I finished out the war.
Yeah.
El Centro, I might go into. El Centro is a staging place, and it come back and actually they and several places, but I stayed at El Centro until I was discharged.
Can I back up and ask you? Do you remember VJ Day? You heard about well, actually, even earlier than that, did you remember where you were when you heard about the atomic bomb, and what were your thoughts about that?
Well, I can't remember exactly where I was when I heard about the atomic bomb, but I was in El Centro. But exactly where I was,
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Could you understand a bomb
But
that size when they told you about it?
We didn't even know they had such a thing. You know, the thing is that we realized that that was a significant thing. Everybody at El Centro, from the time I got there, knew that the next place we was going to, as sure as the sun was going to rise in the east tomorrow morning, we were just as sure that we were going to go. Everybody there was going to go to Japan. I mean, everybody just felt that way.
Yeah.
There was only one person at El Centro that I met that hadn't been overseas. There was a clerk in the head office there that hadn't been overseas, and he was probably 35, 40 years old. He was a clerk of some sort. He was a typist and so on. He'd worked in an office someplace in civilian life. And he was the only person that I know, I'm not saying he's the only one there, but that I know of, that hadn't been overseas. And everybody thought that the next place they went was going to be Japan.
And what were your thoughts on that? Because these people fought to the death. I mean,
well, that's we figured that it would be. You didn't figure you was over the hill yet by any means. I guess you get in the service, you get the idea that, well, I'm in this where I am, and whatever comes, you'll take, whether you like it or not. Most of them had the opinion that they wanted them defeated and were going to do it, and they were going to do their part. And that's significant difference than a lot of the people today. That I would like to see when we get to be that 25% have to take care of 50 to 60% of the people. What's going to happen? Well, the thing is the 25% are not going to have anything.
yeah.
And then they're all going to be, and you better be thinking that you're going to have to take care of yourself again.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt about it. And it just doesn't make, you can add it any way you want to, and you can spin anything you want to, but that's the situation as I see it.
Yeah.
But I got out, really I had about a month's leave coming when I got out. So I got out in January, but I really wasn't out officially out.
January of '46.
Yeah.
Okay.
40,
Okay.
46.
Uh-huh.
Until February sometime, and
Okay.
I can't tell you exactly.
Sure, that's fine.
Then in '48, I got notification I was became a captain, and then,
Did you stay in the reserves then, or?
well, when I got out, when I thought I was going to get out, I went down to where there was people getting out, getting discharged. And I said, well, I want to get discharged. He says, you can't. And I said, why? Well, he says, we got a paper here that says you can't. I don't know it was all, but it wasn't all of them, but I don't know whether it was my classification as an engineering officer, or whether I'd done something, or reason I didn't can get out, I don't know. Never did. They said, well, I asked him what my options were, and they said, well, you can stay in active duty, or you can go in the reserves in active duty. Well, that's what I did.
Yeah, yeah.
I just never went to the trouble to find out, because I know that it's pretty hard to find out some of those things, and I didn't want to be piddling around.
Yeah.
So I just went out.
And you returned back to Kansas then?
Yes.
Okay.
Turned back to Kansas.
Were you able to return to your teaching job? Or?
No.
No?
I worked for a bunch of cooperatives in eastern Colorado as public relations, and I published a paper and a little newsletter type of thing. It was 2 eastern counties, Kit Carson and Yuma County. Worked for seven, I guess, cooperatives, local cooperatives, for a couple of years, and then I thought it was a good job. It was an interesting job, because I enjoyed editing the paper
Mm-hmm.
and meeting with community groups and so forth. But I thought that, that wasn't where the good money was. It was a good job, but
Yeah.
nothing extra. So I went into business, and went into started managing cooperatives, and I managed 3 of them over a period of years, and I got an opportunity to buy a feed mill down there at Keensburg. And so that's what I did, and bought it, and I ran that for 26 years, I guess it was. And we got bought some farms, and then we started buying apartments there in Greeley. I come from a family, and I think it's still continuing, because my son's still that way. They're a little innovative, and they're achievers. I don't think you have to be so brilliant to be. All you have to do is set out and kind of do some of the things that just common sense tell you.
Yeah.
You don't have to be this here idea that somebody owes me a living. Well, I don't believe that
Right,
at all.
right. I think I interrupted you. You were starting to say in '48 you got called back up.
No, I became in '48. I promoted to major, and then shortly after we bought the mill in '54, the fall of '54, and I'm not sure, the next winter, got a letter from them said that they wanted me to go to Japan to teach. Gee, here I just bought this mill.
Yeah.
They only want me to go to teach. And I sunk everything I had into it pretty much, up to the house. Well, I guess we had a house, but I wasn't living in it, and birthed where we were, and didn't know what to do, and so we had a fairly friendly correspondence with the Marine Corps for a couple, 3 months there. I don't know. I guess because I had been a teacher once, they thought I could teach whatever. I don't know what they want to teach me or who. I didn't ask them that. I was kind of interested. Didn't know what to do. I had the mill in my hand. And
Yeah.
grain elevator, I didn't want that. Nobody. And I didn't want to turn it over to anybody.
Right.
So after, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 months, they quit hounding me about it. And that's pretty much the story of my military career.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll start to wind down this interview then. A couple questions I usually like to ask. Well, I guess one question. I guess we covered everything, but my other question is, how do you think that period of your life affected your life? Did it change your life? Have a role in your life, or was it just a period of time in your life?
Well, that's hard to answer. You never know. I think it did two things in one way. I think it gave me confidence that, like I had flight group. And one thing I always was proud of, I never was called up before the colonel and questioned. And I attribute that to the ones under me, an awful lot of it anyhow. We tried to be good to them, and when promotions came up, which they do every 3 or 4 months, whatever it was, you had promotions, and they'd say, well, you can have so many sergeants, and you have so many corporals, and you have 2 tech sergeants, and whatever it is. Well, you tried to dish it out as fair as you knew how, which probably wasn't always right. But I can say every one of the troops under me got at least one promotion, and I was proud of that.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I didn't have anybody that I felt didn't try to carry his load. Some of them went way out of their way, and others went out of their way some. But like I said, I never was called in front of the colonel and what about so and so? I don't think I'd like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as
not that I'd have been intended to make military my career.
Yeah.
And also, I belong to the Marine Corps League. Marine Corps League. I belong to now here, and it's pretty. I'm the oldest one in it. I went back to that trip to Washington you read about, I'm sure.
Yeah, helped out with that.
And
how did you find that trip?
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very well. Yeah, you know, it's like, I don't know how they raised as much. I guess Norm Lynn, Martin Lynn, put up an awful lot of that money from Windsor. I figured when we made that, I gave my donation to the Marine Corps League, and then they gave.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else did that or not. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I thought that was fair.
Now, have you, kind of along these lines, throughout the years, did you ever go back to any sort of reunions, or did you keep in touch with any of the people?
No, and 2 reasons. Primarily, I lost my book. I had the address, and I don't know what I did with it.
Okay.
So I don't have it.
Oh, okay.
It's like that Joe York, that was my assistant on the Jebby. He and I got along real well, and I liked him, and I think he liked me. But all we ever did was write one letter. He told me that I got one letter from him, and then I lost my book, and I wrote a letter to him, but I never did hear from him again where they were, but not whether they'd been moved or whatever.
Right, yeah,
but that
okay.
was a few months after. But he wrote me and told me that Lieutenant Bunn, who had been a pilot but got lost his license or whatever you want to call it, but he was the engineering officer when I left. He took over and took my place, and York told me that they weren't a bit happy with him,
Huh.
but. I don't know any more than that. One letter is all I got from him.
Yeah.
That he had tried to shake up the department and do something, make it more crisp and military, whatever that is. I think probably we were a little slack, but to me they were doing their job and we were getting the job done. I didn't think too much to fit and polish. I think you have to be neat and clean and so forth, but I guess of Michael, I believe old Zachary Taylor, old Rough and Ready, probably got along a little better than Scott did in general in the Mexican War and Pit and Polish.
Yeah.
But that's a matter of people's opinion.
Sure. Well, it seemed to work for you
Yeah,
and your men.
I thought it did. I mean, we tried to make it pleasant, but make sure they got the job done.
Yeah.
It didn't. Whatever it did, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we'll close down this interview, Ralph. I usually like to leave it to you. Is there any closing comments you'd like to make to end off this this interview with?
Well, I appreciate it, and I think that you're doing work that's worthwhile. I think the United States is, I don't know what's going to happen any better than anybody else, but I am afraid that wished we had never heard of some of the things that we're going to see. Military, some people think that there is all bad, but without the military, this country would not be able to boast the highest standard of living that's ever been attained as far as we know on this planet. The people that get out, I remember in those 4 presidential and vice presidential debates that we had this year, the most significant thing that was said was I've never heard it discussed on TV and the paper and anything else, and that was made, and this is just, this isn't verbatim,
Yeah.
but it's, we as an individual, the most important thing we could do, if we would, each one of us, make ourselves a more a responsible and accountable person.
It's a good closing statement. Well, Ralph, I want to thank you for sitting down to tell your story today. More importantly, though, I want to thank you for your service to our country.
Well, didn't do any more than a lot of others, not as much as a lot of others. I forgot one thing I should have brought out, the fact that I had 2 brothers that were twin brothers. One of them was wounded in the area of the Battle of the Bulge. He was a staff sergeant. I don't know exactly. He was a sergeant of some sort. I don't know for sure. But he was in the area of the Battle of Bulge getting supplies for patents on the red ball deal. And he was wounded and he was crippled the rest of his life. His foot was about an inch shorter and it was very little feeling in it. And then the other one was shot down and killed on March 1st, 1945. Fighter pilot went down to strafe a train. We don't know much more about it than that.
Boy, your family is sure sacrificed for this country, for sure.
Well, that's what I can't understand is what are some of the people, they want all the accolades, and what have they ever done?
Yeah.
They have nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
And they have nothing to offer.
Yeah.
The thing is, I think maybe the American people will wake up, but way too late, and it's going to cost them tremendous, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Ralph.
You're welcome.
Go ahead.
This is a flight section, 33 of us, and it was taken in the summer of 44.
Is this out on the island?
Yes, this is on the island. This is the headquarters. This is really the tent that we worked on. It was right close to the flight deal, and This here is Lieutenant York, and this is me, and the rest of them are mechanics, flight section. One of them was a clerk who primarily filled out flight plans and kept, it's what a secretary will do. And the other one is the parachute group, Marine Air Group. You'll read it up here. MAG 22. I think that's what it says. I can't see it from here.
Mm-hmm.
Parachute Loft. Marine MAG. That Marine stands for Marine Air Group 22. And that's what we were. And they're part of Headquarters Squadron. And then I don't have a picture of the PX, and it was in a tent about like this.
So these were two of the
These are on Enjebby.
two of the areas you were in charge of?
Yes.
Okay.